gave me an ultimatum. You said it's either this or we don't do this.
We've already talked about the fact that ultimatums do not have a place, I think, in healthy non-monogamy. Okay, hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before. Or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today, we're talking about couples therapy again because I wanted to talk to you guys about one of the couples, Kyle and Mondo, because there are some non-monogamy things that we get into, and y'all know that we have talked about polyamory a fair amount on the channel. I'll put a playlist up here, actually, with some of those videos if you want to watch. But there's some stuff going on here that I think is odd and worth discussing. So we're talking about Kyle and Mondo this time. If you don't know, we have talked about couples therapy in the past, both on our Friday live streams, which you should come hang out for, by the way, if you haven't yet. They're very fun. So we're going to talk about this couple now. Let's do that now.
I was born in Poland, and I moved to America when I was 3 or 4 years old. And then that's when we found out I was deaf.
What do you mean that's when you found out you're deaf?
I think my mother was in denial. Her noble intention was to have me function as a hearing person and not to be a deaf person. So no American Sign Language. I was born to read lips. And so my deaf identity was suppressed.
Mm-hmm. I am with Orna on that one. This is an incredibly unkind thing to do to a child. And listen, I'm not trying to tell people who have deaf children definitively how they should raise their child. That's none of my business. I recognize that some folks who are deaf adults feel that reading lips is a perfectly valid and, non-traumatizing choice for them. And for a child to essentially be in isolation with very little resources for communicating to the folks around them, not helpful, right? This is a thing that can cause trauma to a child to not have the ability to effectively communicate with their family and with their peers, regardless of somebody's stance on whether, like the capital D deaf community, lowercase d deaf community, reading lips, etc. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there. I'll link some stuff in the description for you guys to read about it if you want. But regardless of somebody's orientation or beliefs about those things, it is critical that we give children the means to communicate with their loved ones and with the world around them. So to not do that is incredibly unhelpful and, again, has the potential to be traumatizing to a child.
Because I was growing up as a child with no full access to communication language, I was super isolated.
There you go.
In high school and even at grad school, I was the only deaf person in the room. Wasn't until a friend of mine introduced me to the gay community and my life just changed afterward. When COVID happened, I relied on lip reading, wearing face masks.
Yes, I assumed that role of the adult, the accessible hearing person who's now having to make sure my partner's okay.
For what it's worth, I don't know if we're going to get into this in this video. I don't remember how many clips of Kyle and Mondo I have. They do talk later about how Mondo was put in a situation to be a translator for his parents. So the language around this feels very ableist. Aaron and I were very off-put by this when we first watched it. But I do think the context of Mondo being essentially traumatized by having to be an adult for his parents when he was a child contributed to the language here. But generally, for what it's worth, having to be an accessible person for a disabled loved one doesn't make you more responsible or more of an adult than them. This is like a very ableist thing, right? Of like, disabled people are children. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're also just fucking adults who need access to the same things that abled people have access to, so.
I struggle because I don't want to feel like the fucking parent. It's not fun to be the responsible one. And
important to point out that your mom died of COVID.
That was the point, shifting as Mondo becoming an adult. She passed away January of 2021. Everything changed. The dynamic between us changed. The dynamic of me and my family changed.
Wow.
Suddenly, I became the adult in my family.
Also that.
Responsible for everything all of a sudden. Then I started to reflect how it's manifesting in my relationships, especially with Kyle. Oof, this is getting tough.
Tell me.
For what it's worth, I love the way that Orna says that. Tell me. It's such a simple and succinct way to invite further expansion on a topic. It's sort of a meme in the therapy world that therapists would be like, please say more about that, which they do say. I say that sometimes. But the way that she says this is just lovely. I feel like she does a great job of embodying the general ideal for therapists in listening and being present without overtaking the room. And so if you're a new therapist or, just generally wanting to look at some good therapy practice, like this is very much that. I want to take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsor this week, which is Beducated. Y'all know that I'm a Beducated fanboy, and it's because they are a platform that is dedicated to all things sex and relationship learning. And their platform is filled with, first of all, over 100 courses. There's literally a course for everybody at every point of your life, every interest that you might have, including non-monogamy, by the way, in a bunch of different ways. But their courses are also led by industry experts, so you can trust that the information is reliable, it's trustworthy, it's fact-based. I'm a big fan of that. This month, I've actually been trying out a course that is called Full Body Massage, a practice for your partner's sensual well-being, because in case you don't know, Aaron and I are in the middle of moving, and it's stressful, y'all. It sucks. So it's been really fun for us to connect over this physical practice that helps ground us in our bodies. And we've learned new things about massage that we didn't know before, because it's kind of a taboo thing, right? To talk about sex and pleasure. And I really appreciate that Beducated is specific and explicit without it being pornographic or objectifying. So I want to pass that joy along to you guys. So go click that link in the description. You can get 50% off of their yearly pass, which is actually 10% more than you can get anywhere else. So shout out to Beducated. But you can get 60% off of their yearly pass when you use my code, Mickey Atkins. So make sure that you go click that link. There's a 14-day money-back guarantee, so you can dip your toes in the water. But I'm telling you, go click that link, get your 60% off of the yearly pass, and say thank you to yourself, to me, to Beducated, and show yourself some love. Thank you very much to Beducated for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in.
Anxiety that I've been feeling is associated with the new thing that we're taking on as like an open relationship.
Oh boy.
Oh.
Wow, that almost like didn't want to come out of my mouth, didn't it?
Feels very telling.
Kyle suddenly introduced this concept of, I want to have sexual relations with other men, whether you're in it or not.
That's a choice. That's a way of wording it. Whatever, just
I want to explore this part of my life. I need you to move forward with me because I will not accept monogamy. You know, he pretty much said, it's either this or that.
What do you mean it's either this or that?
It's either this, you accept it, or that, which is bye. Like, we may have to part ways.
I don't like being contained.
No. And
this is such a meme of like, I don't want to be contained. I don't like being contained. Here's the thing. This is the reason that I wanted to talk about this, which is that in the world of non-monogamy, polyamory, whatever, right? It's an umbrella term because there are like 3 million ways to practice this as a relationship orientation or a practice in your relationship, whatever. And the practice of like, I'm going to give you an ultimatum and either we're all in or we're all out is really not a good one. Because here's the thing. I think there's a way to phrase this in saying, like, I have realized about myself that I am a person who needs non-monogamy in my relationships. And so I love you. I want to experience that with you. And I don't know if you're not okay with that. I don't know if I will be able to be fulfilled in our relationship. That is understandable in my opinion. And to say right here on a dime, figure it out, otherwise I'm leaving, feels very coercive. There's an aspect of this that is very pushy and not respecting of somebody else's autonomy, which is the real gag in this whole situation, which is that polyamorous people tend to talk about, or non-monogamous people tend to talk about valuing an individual's autonomy in their relationship, right? And so generally there tends to be kind of a like, you get to do what is fulfilling for you, I get to do what is fulfilling for me, and as long as we're both abiding by the norms and like the expectations within our relationship, we're caring for one another, we're respecting one another, maintaining like honesty and all the things, then that's kind of what we're allowed to do. We prioritize our own time, we respect that no one person is entitled to my time or attention, and that's the way that it works. Except that in this situation, Kyle is saying, what I want is what I'm going to do, and so whatever you want, kind of be damned, this is what's happening here. There's not a lot of respect for Mondo's autonomy in this situation, which is both gross and kind of like funny, not in a ha-ha way, but in the like sort of what the fuck type of way, right? If you experience this in a non-monogamous context, please know that you're very allowed to be like, that sucks. I don't like that. Actually, I would kind of encourage you to run the other way from somebody who says, well, ethical non-monogamy is the way, and so if you're not cool with it, then you're less evolved than I am. Or like, I can't be contained, so if you want to be in a relationship with me, then we're doing this, right? It's one thing to present it as an option and to say, again, I feel this way, I want you to move forward with me, take some time to think about it, right? Maybe we can try a 6-month period of time where we're checking in. Maybe we go to therapy and talk about, I feel this way, they feel that way. We don't know what to do about that, right? And we explore, what about non-monogamy is appealing to you? What about monogamy is appealing to you? Et cetera, all the things, right? There's a lot of ways that we can hard launch a change like this while still having a level of respect and compassion for our partner, and also being appreciative of the fact that this is a big change for a lot of people. It runs contrary to what a lot of people are taught about relationships, which is that if somebody really loves you, they will forsake all others, right? That's a very culturally embedded thing for a lot of us, especially those of us that grew up in religion. So it can feel like someone's telling you, I don't love you enough to be monogamous with you when we hard launch a change like this. There's a lot of things about this that I don't like, and there's also a lot of potential for this to go wrong. So again, for what it's worth, if you experience this, this is not great.
If it was up to me, the choice would be no.
No open relationship.
No open relationship. And it's not because of control of any sorts of whatever. It's really just me, like, it just seems less messy, less stuff to deal with, right? Like,
Fair.
Opening the relationship, I think, is just welcoming a slew of new problems, right?
For what it's worth, a lot of people who transition from monogamy to polyamory or non-monogamy have a time, right? We've talked pretty openly on this channel about how Aaron and I, when we transitioned from monogamy to non-monogamy, went through it because it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do. It causes you to navigate a lot of logistical and practical changes, but also it has a funny way of pushing buttons on all of your relationship traumas and your attachment issues and your insecurities and your self-esteem, your identity stuff. There's a lot of things that get dredged up that you have to have the emotional acuity to deal with. And a lot of people might not have realized that they don't because you're not dealing with it sometimes. And so he's not wrong in saying that, like, there's just less mess necessarily. Not to say that it's like a more virtuous thing, because it's not, right? They're equivalent and that's not a question. But it is fair, I think, to say, like, I just don't want to open that can of worms. Because once you open it, it's kind of hard to close the lid on all of these traumas and things that you've discovered that you now do kind of have to deal with or repress them.
I know this is something that has a lot to do with Kyle's identity. I have to be flexible. I love him so much. I mean, I just absolutely adore him. So there's a part of me that feels like I have to release that anxiety in order for this to happen, so that he can be happy, so that he can have that experience, so that he can feel like he's getting something that he needs.
But notice how it doesn't really seem to be in the reverse. Kyle doesn't necessarily seem to be saying, I understand that this is really important to you, or this is a part of your identity, and so we're going to practice trying to meet somewhere in the middle, right? Because there are shades of gray, despite what people think. It's entirely possible to say, I don't want to be contained by monogamy, so maybe we can explore what it looks like to have sexual non-monogamy within particular contexts, right? Maybe we practice swinging for a while, or we're open to, I don't know, like sex parties or, threesomes or group sex, or maybe we try having some of these experiences every now and again and see how we feel, right? We make some space to process our emotions after the fact. But again, to say, like, we're polyamorous is pretty intense. We're not meeting in the middle here. It seems like Mondo is meeting Kyle over here, which is not great.
I'd love to figure out, like, why is it so important? It doesn't make any sense to me, but it is, and I want to understand
Mondo.
why. Where is he going with this? Like, how does the identity of deafness relate to the subject of the open relationship? And you did this recently when we were talking about your last hookup.
Bring me in what happened there?
For what it's worth, this happens a lot in therapy where somebody will be like, okay, yeah, so, this thing. And sometimes it's like, no, I wasn't there. Please explain it more. So that was this. I just thought it was funny and kind of validating that, like, okay, great. Other people's clients do this too.
And then I looked back at the majority of the men that he has had a relationship outside of our relationship. They've all been deaf. Is all of this about you being deaf, needing to hook up with other deaf men because you're filling up a cup that you're not getting at home? In essence.
Are you asking?
Yeah, I think that's a question.
If he were deaf, what would that relationship look like? I have no idea. These hookups are coming from a place of feeling frustrated because growing up, I never really experienced liberation or freedom. I'm just gonna try it. I don't know.
Is Kyle answering your question?
He's only making me want to ask more.
Okay.
Yeah.
God bless Orna for this moment because sometimes this will happen. And this is why couples therapy is incredibly useful. Hold on, let me find somewhere to put my fucking drink on this table. This is why couples therapy can be really helpful sometimes if you and your partner are experiencing like a disconnect where you feel like you're answering their questions or you feel like you're being communicative, but it doesn't really seem to land with your partner. Sometimes this is why, right? Because person A will ask a question, person B will say something, but they're not maybe directly answering the question. So person A is like, who are you talking to right now? And person B is like, I literally just answered your question. What are you talking about? But having a mediator to be like, does this answer your question? Like did this really help create some clarity for you? And the answer clearly is no. So we can kind of come back to this question without it feeling combative or without somebody having to be like, no, but you're not answering my question though, right? Because sometimes there's a very valid human frustration there, but it can be difficult with just two people to kind of get at this issue. So I thought it was nice to see in real time why a couples therapist can be so instrumental in bridging that gap between two people.
Is that why I'm feeling triggers of inadequacy when you choose a deaf person to hook up with?
That's what came to you.
The inadequacy, the light was off. It was just like, which also fuels the anger. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, we've just had a nice, healthy blowout.
I also really appreciate that in this moment, Mondo is just being very transparent about this triggering my feelings of inadequacy and this making me feel X, Y, and Z, and just laying all the cards on the table face up like they talked about. This to me is like, especially, we're going to talk about another couple from this season. And this is like the antithesis to some of the other couples on this season, where there's a lot of really vague language and a lot of concealing, it seems, of how we feel and what our true thoughts are. And this is just really nice to see some folks who I think really genuinely just needed somebody to kind of be that midpoint for them and help create the clarity, as opposed to trying to like some of the couples on the show are really duking it out with each other. This is nice.
Burden that sometimes that you may not really understand me.
Very honest.
I love you so much that whatever happens, I'll do it.
This was a nice moment to see. I also want to draw attention to the fact that Orna is just sort of sitting there taking this all in. Again, I think a good example of what useful engagement in a session can look like, because she's still engaged. She's clearly observing what's going on, but kind of giving them time to talk to each other rather than someone saying, okay, to Orna, here, this is how I feel. And then Orna saying, okay, well, this is how that person's feel. We're not playing telephone, right? We're not triangulating the therapist. These people, especially Mondo and Kyle, seem to really be good at communicating with each other rather than at a therapist and sort of waiting for the other person to kind of hear that, you know? That's a very big difference.
If you remember when we were in Fire Island, like you kind of gave me an ultimatum. You said it's either this or we don't do this.
We've already talked about the fact that ultimatums do not have a place, I think, in healthy non-monogamy. And again, everybody's going to practice non-monogamy differently, but the boundaries around ultimatums in a relationship can be very tricky. Actually, there is a great Beducated course that is about navigating non-monogamy and like open relationships. So again, shout out to Beducated for having a course about everything. Link in description. But I think this is just important to draw attention to, which is that if somebody feels as though they're having their hand forced around any issue in a relationship, then we need to back it up, right? We have a problem here and we need to better navigate. Like, are you asking for something? Is that what you're saying? Because that's different than demanding. And ultimatums can feel like demanding. Also want to point out the fact that this is different than saying, I cannot be in a relationship where X, Y, or Z is not happening, right? And so I'm asking for you to meet me where I'm at, or I'm asking for you to find somewhere in the middle with me so that I can continue to be in a relationship with you because I love you, because I want to be with you. And if that cannot happen, either because you're not able to, you're not willing to, you don't feel comfortable to, I gotta go, right? That's very different as opposed to sort of holding a relationship hostage contingent on your compliance with what it is that I want. Those things also feel very different when you're subjected to them. So
This, we either stay open or we don't, and this relationship ends. There was no working around it. If
Not great.
I'm working very hard at trying to figure out how to make an open relationship work, have you given any thought as to why you have such an aversion to monogamy?
yes, Mondo. Good for you, man.
What about monogamy is so hard for you to be in?
I think there are multiple thoughts that come up. Fear of containment, the fear of being committed to one person only.
What's wrong with that?
I don't see it. I don't see how we could love one person. And how I see it is that the energy that I have, I want to give it off to you. And if I have a friend that I feel this energy and it's consensual, it works both ways, why not share that?
Which I think is super valid, right? Let's be very clear about that. I think that's kind of a foundational thought for a lot of folks in non-monogamy, which is that we love multiple friends, right? We love all of our family equally. We can have multiple siblings and love them equally. We can have like relationships of all different types that we love more than one person, or we can say that, you know, love doesn't get smaller as we kind of parcel it out amongst all these folks. But we, for some reason, in romantic relationships are like, absolutely not, right? That for some folks is sort of nonsensical. And so this is very fair. I get where Kyle is coming from. And it doesn't mean that it is a foregone conclusion that all people will think this as long as they're sort of pushed into practicing non-monogamy. Some people are just built monogamous, and that's fine. Relationships come in all sizes and shapes and colors and shades of gray, orientations, practices, likes and dislikes, and that is inherently a beautiful thing. And that does not mean that we should turn our noses up at monogamy and say, I'm polyamorous, you are monogamous, my choice is the right choice. Either get on board or get left behind.
I just am trying to understand. If monogamy is something you know you can't do, I want to know that you know why. Because I think for me personally, the thing that I fear the most is when Kyle can become another person when he's intoxicated under the influence.
Oh boy.
And then I just kind of see Kyle drifting away with either another guy or another group of guys. Inside, I'm like falling apart. Oh my God, where's he going? What's gonna happen? I get concerned.
You have the tendency of thinking of the worst case scenario, whether it's in our relationship,
Sure.
previous relationship,
Sure.
all the way from the childhood. Over protectiveness, it's like feel naggy, it feel okay, you're being unrealistic. Where's my little bit of freedom? And that's when I started to roll my eyes. He's overreacting, he's overprotective, he's overanalyzing. You're not my mom. I think one of the reasons why we came here in the first place is to learn how to communicate with each other. How I can be able to be vulnerable, be able to effectively communicate with you.
It is very clear that Mondo is like either currently dissociating or right on the border of dissociating. And the fact that Kyle seems to be just sort of like, is concerning to me. Ideally, we want to be emotionally in check with our partner enough to notice when they are like on the precipice of freaking the fuck out, essentially. And it, I think, is clear that Mondo does not seem to be cool right now. He's having a hard time, right? I don't remember if Orna intervenes in this moment or not, but I also would hope that Orna would notice this and be like, hold on, back up, right? Like, let's take a pause. I think she might do that here, actually. I don't remember, but let's find out.
You will be there.
Pause.
Oh, good, she does. Okay.
Sorry.
Hell
Sorry,
yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out
it's
to
like
Orna.
Intense. I'm really holding myself down right now because it's like, this is heavy. This is some heavy stuff coming up. I'm sorry.
Oh, hold on. Fair warning. There is going to be a discussion about intimate partner violence, DV, etc. That is pretty upsetting, and also some addiction and drug use stuff. So if that's a button for you, proceed with caution. I'll put a playlist up here of like cool, happy, fun times, cutesy stuff. If you would like to emergency exit at any point.
Mondo, take your
Yeah, I
time.
know. I'm like,
Really quick, for what it's worth, as just a PSA, this is something I say to my clients all the time. Take your time, right? We have time. Please know that you are allowed to just sit and cry, or to take a minute and to be anxious, or to not be able to speak, or just like be in your body for a moment, because that's what therapy is for, right? I tell my clients that all the time. If there was a place, it's this one. So know that any good therapist is never going to sit there and think like, God, hurry up. No. The point is that especially therapy is a safe place for you to feel all the things that you might have been like suppressing all week or your whole life, right? So take your time, take your space. We're not in any hurry. We have the time. And even if we start to like go overtime or whatever, it is the therapist's job to communicate with you about the timeliness of our sessions and all of those things in a way that's kind, in a way that's empathic. And quite frankly, if we go over by 2 minutes, not that big of a deal, right? If it means the difference between promoting somebody's safety and well-being and getting them back to a regulated place, most therapists are willing to take the 120 seconds that it might cost to give you the space that you need to process. So just know that you're allowed. That's the point, and no good therapist should be judging you.
So I was in a domestic violence situation with an ex who was on drugs, and I didn't know. I had no idea.
So scary.
What was he on?
Crystal meth.
Even
Anyways,
scarier.
We had gone out one night. I found him completely naked. It wasn't that kind of party. People were not naked. It was just him. He lost his clothes, lost his wallet, lost his phone, lost everything. I got us home to my house, and he must have not known who I was, because then he just turned around and then punched the hell out of me.
Terrible what you're describing.
Yeah, it sucked.
Understatement.
Openness to me comes with so much unknown. It scares the crap out of me. You have to understand, for me, it's like these little things that tend to be super minor and small and innocent, those could have meaning, which is why I'm giving you the responsibility to understand why not monogamy. Why not keep your partner safe? Because I would do anything to keep you safe.
See, this is again the thing where it's clear that an open relationship, non-monogamy, represents something that is a trauma trigger, essentially, right? And Mondo is still making the effort to work through it and to meet Kyle halfway, which, to be clear, I don't think that he necessarily has to do. I think it would be super valid to say, like, that is something that is too triggering for me to go there, and I just simply cannot. That's also fair. But he's making that effort to meet Kyle halfway. And I don't know that Kyle has like really, maybe up until now, understood what that means. And this is also why it's very important for non-monogamous people to not be the people where we say things about like, you know, non-monogamy being so much more evolved and, you know, mature and like we're better and blah, 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 whatever. Because somebody choosing monogamy might be choosing the thing that helps to keep their nervous system regulated either forever because that trauma is just a really intense thing, or because it's something that they're working through and maybe they want to be non-monogamous, but it's not safe for them to do that right now. People have the right to make that choice, and that doesn't make them less than. So friendly reminder about that. But also, again, I wanted to point out here that there are a lot of things happening at play here that are not just about, I want monogamy, you want non-monogamy, and so either we figure it out or break up. It's not quite that simple.
How are you feeling listening to Mondo telling what happened?
And right now, I do understand how you're making an association because, like you said, you never thought that in a million years that would happen to you, and it did. Now you're thinking, okay, if that happens to me, then anything could happen to me.
Yeah, because I let my guard down completely with this guy.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, also, being in a place where we are assuming that, like the thing that Mondo said about, like, I would do anything to keep you safe, right? Like, why not keep your partner safe? Is kind of assigning like an inherent danger to non-monogamy that doesn't necessarily have to be true, because it seems like he was in a monogamous relationship with this other person when this really dangerous thing happened. It does seem like there is kind of a trauma in the driver's seat thing that might not necessarily be giving polyamory, non-monogamy a fair shake here, right? It's a trauma response that I think, again, is super valid. And I think there is some further conversation to be had here about, like, this is an attempt to keep yourself safe from a perceived danger that might also just exist in our current dynamic. Not that Kyle's dangerous, obviously. But the point I'm making is that, like, if we live our life as though danger is around every corner, then we experience the nervous system activation of finding danger around every corner. And so the wisdom is not in anticipating danger everywhere, but rather in learning how to regulate our nervous system enough that we can be wise, obviously, about avoiding things that are obviously and overtly dangerous without that controlling our whole life, right? That we get to make the choices for ourselves rather than our trauma history making them for us.
I'm sorry it's coming up, but I'm using it because I'm trying to get you to understand that hopefully there's some clarity there. Now you understand where I'm possibly coming from. I'm thinking that's where it could possibly come from.
What is your reaction?
Telling myself and reminding myself, you have that really amazing partner that you want to take into consideration. Not be mindful, but be considerate of his past and how my current decision can cause emotional pain for him. So yeah, I'm hearing you.
The thing that I want to note here is that there's not really any disclosure that Kyle has about his own feelings. And it also seems like kind of a throwaway thing to say that, like, I have to be considerate of my partner and how his past might be influencing, how he's experiencing my choices. Yes, I don't understand how that's like a new realization. I think this would be a very valid thing for somebody to have their feelings hurt by, because the question I think for a lot of people is like, how did it take this for you to have the realization that you need to be considerate of my past, but also just my feelings generally in the way that your actions affect me, right? I guess this is just a good reminder that if you find yourself in a relationship with somebody who doesn't seem to often consider the impact of their behavior on your emotions, that you are allowed to put a foot down and say, like, this fucking sucks, and I need you to be aware that this is what I'm feeling, right? And I'm not going to hide it, and I don't need to shield you from it or like kitten glove you through the process of recognizing that there are consequences to your actions, right? That's, I think, a given about a relationship. And so this whole disclosure is like a little odd to me, because it seems like it's more so that we're trying to hide emotions rather than it is that, like, Kyle just had this realization now. And I'm curious about why that is. I think they do talk about it later in the season, which if you want me to talk about those episodes, let me know. We do have a couple of other clips that we're going to talk about another couple on this show. So stay tuned for that, by the way. Check out that video because I am excited. I have a lot of things to say about Boris and Jessica. But if you guys like the video, you can subscribe. We do talk about stuff like this, and we do a cute educational moment that I'd love to have you stay for. And then you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I'll see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.